Hello all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. And in today's video, we'll be talking about another important data type in Python, which is list. In the previous video, I've covered strings in Python. And in that video, you can understand what are the different ways you can format strings in Python, along with most of the built-in functions, which will be useful for you to work with strings. So make sure you watch that video as well, and you will find the link to the video in the description below. So let's start with the list part. So what are lists in Python, or basically what is exactly a list? Lists are just like dynamic sized arrays, and they need not be homogeneous in nature. And that is the key part which makes them powerful to use in Python. A single list may contain data types like integers, strings, floats, as well as objects, as well as you can have a list inside a list. Lists are mutable in nature. And what do we mean by mutable in nature? So by the end of this video, you will be having the understanding of what is immutable and mutable. Lists in Python are ordered and have a definite count. Now, the question arises, what do you mean by ordered? So whenever we say our data type is ordered in nature, that simply means it has a definite way of arranging its elements. In a simple language, it has an index through which you can access the elements. The elements in a list are indexed according to a definite sequence, and the indexing of a list is done with 0 being the first index. Each element in the list has its own definite place in the list, which allows duplicating of elements in the list, with each element having its own distinct place and credibility. So that is the basic language or basic definition of lists. So let's start with list, and first and foremost, we need to learn how we can actually create list in Python. So as you can see, you can create list in Python by by enclosing the data inside square brackets. So what you do basically, you open square brackets and close square brackets, then you can enter any number, any element. Let's say it's an integer, and let's say it is a string itself, and each and every element should be separated by commas. So 1 2 3 4 5 6, and then it is a homogeneous list in Python. Now there are two things: what is homogeneous and what is non-homogeneous. So homogeneous simply means the list has all the elements with the same data type. For example, a list has only integers, a list has only decimals, a list has only strings. When it comes to non-homogeneous, it simply means a list contains mixture of data types. It can have an integer, it can have an integer, it can have a decimal, it can have a string, it can also have a list inside a list. So basically here you can see L1 is homogeneous and L2 is non-homogeneous. And again, we create list with the help of square brackets. And if I run this cell by hitting shift enter, so as you can see, I have two lists, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and other with the non-homogeneous list. And another way of creating lists in Python is basically using the built-in list function. So what do I mean by that? So it's very simple. So there is a built-in list function in Python. So let's say I create a list sample and I use list, and then you just pass anything you want. Let's say I pass 6 as a string, then -10, and then you execute it and you print sample. So that way you can also create list in Python with the help of list function, or you just simply use square brackets. Now, talking about list of list in Python, the concept of list in Python is basically inside a list, if you put list as a individual element. So if you see, I have created a list L3 which consists of two elements, L1 and L2, and L1 and L2 are itself list in their own form. And if you execute this, you can see this is the first element of the list, then I have separated it, then this is the second element of the list. Now if you want to see the number of elements inside the list, let's say you want to know how many elements are there inside my list, so you can simply use the length function, so which says len, and it can accept a list object which is L1, L3, L2, whatever the list object, to name it. And if you see, it says 6 because the list L1 has 6 elements. So the length function provides the number of elements in the list. Now, How do we access elements in a list? So basically, as I mentioned, lists are ordered in nature. That means they have a definite sequence of elements and they use indexing to store their elements. With the help of indexing, we can actually access the elements of the list. Now, if you want more understanding of indexing, you can watch our previous video because I've covered indexing in Python in detail, and you can find the link in the description below. But I will give you a brief introduction to indexing as well. So basically, there are two types of indexing in Python. One is forward indexing and one is backward indexing. Forward indexing starts with 0 and the backward indexing starts with -1. So if you see how we can access elements in a list. So if you want to print out the first element of a list, so I'm actually printing the list itself. So I can see what is the first element, and then how do we access the first element? First, you write the list or object, that is the name of the object in which the list is stored. Then you use square bracket, and inside the square bracket, you pass the index of the element you want to print. Since the first element will be on the 0th index, so I have passed 0. And when you execute it, as you can see, I have list this, and first element is 1. I have printed this. Now let's say you want the last element from the list. Now here comes the benefit of backward index, because backward index starts with -1. So no matter how long or how big your list is, the last element will always be at -1. So if just in case you want to understand, if you want to know what is the last element of your list, you just need to do L1, that is the list object, square bracket, and -1. And as you can see, the last object is 6. Now, here comes the interesting part. So let's say you want to print out the every second element of your list in Python. So let me just remove these. So if you see, you need to understand this particular syntax. So what happens? This square bracket has a syntax of start, stop, and step. Colon, step. So I'm starting from 0, that is my starting position. I'm going, that is stopping position, because if you're starting, you have to end your list. Basically, you want to tell Python that I want to go from 0 to this point. So here I'm telling I want to I want to start from 0, and then I want to go to the end of the list. Basically, that is the length of the list, and I want the step. So how do you reach from start to stop? You have to pass an step value. So by default, the step value is 1. So if you pass 2 over here, so it will have a step of 2. So first you will print 0, then 0 plus 2, it is 2. Then you print the element at index 2, then 2 plus 2 is 4. Then you will print the element at index 4. And if you execute it, see, the list is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the first element is 1, and the second element to first is third, and the second element to third is fifth. That's how we can actually print every second element every second element from the list. Now, what's the interesting part is that actually you don't need to mention that you want to go till the end of the list. Python will itself know that you want to go to the end of the list. So you just mention starting position, colon, again a colon, because this space should be for the stopping value. But in case you don't mention the stopping value, Python itself will go till the end of the list, and then you pass the stepping position, and here we go. So see, the execution and the result is same. Now the more interesting part, you don't even need to type 0 over here. If you don't type 0 over here, so what happens? Python takes the default value of start as 0, and it will know that since you have not passed the stop value, so you want to go to the end of the string. And here we go. So the execution and the result is same. So if you do not pass the start value, the default value is 0. If you do not pass the stop value, the default value is the end of the string. Now, reversing the list in Python. So in order to reverse a string in Python, we make use of backward indexing, that is from -1. Now, the list starts from -1 from the backward. So it goes like -1, -2, -3, -4, and so on and so forth. So what happens, you want to tell Python that I want to start from -1 and I want to reverse my string. So you have to print -1 and -2. Remember, the step value of by default step value in Python is 1. So you have to change the step value, because if you do not change the step value will be 1. And if you start it from -1, then -1 plus 1 will be 0. Your list will not move forward. So in order to move forward, you have to tell Python that I'm starting from -1 and my stepping position is -1. And again, you don't need to mention the end of the string. Python will itself know that you want to go to the end. And if you hit enter, as you can see, the real string, actual string is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you have printed 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, guys, just hear me out. Here we are actually reversing the string. Just seeing the output. It is not actually, the output is not actually stored. So if I again print L1, I can see my list is as it is. It is not stored as a reversed list. Let's say you want to reverse the list and you want to store it. Basically, you want to update it in the L1 variable itself. So that way, if you want to do it that way, you can use the inbuilt reverse function. So you just have to write L1 dot reverse. And if you just hit shift enter, and after this, if you print L1, see, the list is reversed. So this function, what it does, it basically reverses the string and it stores the output in the variable itself. So that way you can either use this or you can use this. That is your choice. Now, moving to how we can add elements to list. So I have created two lists, one is even and one is odd. Let's say you want to add 100 to the list. So what I've done, I am printing the value, I am printing the list before adding 100 and I am printing the list after adding 100. So in order to add an element, we make use of append function. So how do we use it? List object dot append and the value. It append function always adds the value at the end of the string. You don't have a choice over here. Whenever you use append, make sure you remember that the element will be always added to the last, that is end of the string. Sorry, again, I'm really sorry, guys. Again, list. And if you, okay, sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't execute this. Now, if you see before adding 100, my list was 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And after adding 100, my list is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 100. Now, here I'm adding only one element. Let's say I want to add one or more elements. So as you can see, and yeah, as you can see, when I'm using append, it is actually stored. It is not reflecting me a temporary view. It is actually storing the value. So that is one thing, that is important thing to remember. Now, let's say I want to add one or more elements. Now, what you can do, you can just you cannot simply write 200 comma 300 or first value comma second value. Let's say I have passed a list of elements. So you must be thinking that now we have a list by uh, by values like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 and 300. But if I execute this, see, if you see the last element is 200 and 300. So what happens if you use append function to add more than one value to a list? It will actually store the whole list as a single element itself. So this particular value is a single element. Now, what is the solution for it? So append function you can use only to add one element to a list, and that to end of the list. If you want to add more element to the list, we use extend function. So extend function, the functionality is similar. You just have to write list object dot extend, and then you pass multiple values as a list, and then you hit shift enter, and as you can see, it is adding differently. It is adding adding elements separately. Now again, extend function also adds the element to the last. Now let's say you want to add elements but at your own will of place. So basically you want to add at index 2, index 3, or whatever the place you want to add. So that way we use insert function. So I'm printing the list without, sorry, before insert function, and then I'm using even dot insert. So the syntax of insert function is first you pass the index at which you want to enter or add an element, and then you pass the element. So I'm adding 2 so as index, so basically the third element, because the index start at 0, so 0, 1 and 2. So I want my third element to be 640, and as you can see my third element was 30 earlier. After inserting, my element is third element is 640. Okay, so we have accessed the elements. We now know how to add elements. Now let's see how we can delete elements. So first we use the pop function. The pop function works on indexes. So let's say I want to remove the last value, that is 300, from this list. So you just have to write even the list name dot pop. So by default, pop function removes the last elements of the list. Now if I print my list, print even, if you see 300 is not included. So by default, pop function includes the last element. Now let's say you want to remove the first element, that is 10. So that is easy, and it is simple as writing even.pop, and then you pass the index. Just remember, pop function works on indexes. So you have to pass the index, not the value. So you pass 0, and then it will return the value which has popped, and then you print even and see 10, the value 10 is removed. Okay, now moving on to another function to delete element from the list, that is remove function. So what remove function does, remove function also removes the element just like pop, but the difference is pop function works on indexes and remove function works on elements. So let's say again you can see the uh, list has 2640. Now I want to remove this particular part from my list. So how do I do that? Even dot remove. Now remove function works on values, so you have to pass the exact value to the function. Oh, sorry. Now it will not return anything, and then you print the even value. So see, this value is removed. So make sure you remember the difference between pop and remove. If you want to remove the value on the basis of index, then go for pop. If you want to remove the value on the basis of the value inside the list, then go for remove. Now, let's say you want to remove the multiple elements, because remove function and pop function only removes specific values. So let's say you want to remove the first 4 values. So you can do the slicing itself. So what is slicing exactly? Just let me give you a brief introduction to it. So let's say you want to print out the first 4 elements of the list. So we can it is easy to do, right? You just write even in square bracket. So 0 to 4. So 0 to 4, this colon basically represents the range. So 0, 1, 2, and 4. But the fourth index, that is the stopping index, is not inclusive. So it will print the values at index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. It will not print the value at index 4. It is not inclusive. Now let's say you want to print uh, again, if you want to print every second element till the index 4. So that is 20 and 30 itself. Now, this way you can remove multiple elements. So let's say I want to remove first 4 elements. So this is my first 4 elements. If you want to remove those, so first you slice them, and then you use the del keyword, which stands for delete. So del space, and then you pass basically specifies the list elements which you want to delete. And then again, if you print, now you have only 50, 100, and 200. So that is how you can use the del function. Now I have another list called odd. Let's say you know that there is a list inside your sorry, there is an element inside your list, let's say 21, but you don't know at which place 21 is. So if you want to note the index, so what you can do, just write even, that is sorry, the list object dot index, and then you pass the value for which you want to find the index 21. So it will return 1 because 21 is at index 1. What happens if you pass a value which is not inside the list? It will throw an error, value error. 212 is not in list. So that way you can find the index of some elements. Now let's say you want to find how many times a particular element is occurring inside your list. How many times a particular element is occurring inside your list. So that way you can use, for that you can use the count function. Odd dot count, odd dot count, and then you can, let's say I want to see how many times 11 is there, so it should return 1, and then you see it returns 1. So with the help of count function you can actually see how many times an element is occurring inside your list. Now, moving on to, let's say you want to create a copy of a string. So there are two things. Let's say if I do sample1 equals to L1, and if I print L1 and print sample. So you can see, oh sorry, it should be sample1. So you can see both sample1 and L1 are equal. But what happens? Let's say I delete the last element in L1, that is 1. So I do L1 dot pop. So what happens with sample? The sample remains the same. Let me just see. Oh, sorry. Again, it should be sample1. So as you can see, the moment I remove L1 from, sorry, the moment I remove 1 from L1, it gets removed from sample itself because the instances are same. So whatever you do in L1, it will get reflected in sample one. But let's say you don't want this to happen. You don't want this to occur and you want to create a copy of it so that you can work on the copy, so that the changes you make on the copy list, that does not get reflected to the sample list. So let me just print sample. So let's create a copy of it. Sample underscore copy. So you can use the copy function. Sample dot copy. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add 100 to sample. Sorry, sample dot append 100. Now I'm going to print sample and I'm going to print sample copy. See, as you can see, 100 is already added. Let me just print sample copy, but the 100 is not added to the sample copy. So that is the benefit of the copy function. So whatever you do on the copy, it does not get reflected to the copy instance. So whatever you do, you can just have a perfect example to it. Now comes the part of mutable and immutable. So basically lists are mutable in nature. Now what do we mean by that? Mutable means you can edit the elements inside your list. So if you see, we have a list called L1 and it has an element 65432. Now I want to replace 6 with 6000. So how do we do that? First you slice the element which you want to update. So L1 of 0. So because 6 is at the 0th position, and then you use equality operator, that is assignment operator, and then you write 100 And if you run this and again you print L1, so as you can see now we have updated 6 with 100. So this is called mutable because lists are mutable in nature. And mutability simply means that you can update a particular data type or particular data structure. So that is the reason, that is the explanation behind mutable and immutable. So I hope you were able to understand the concepts which I've understood in this, the simple concept, the difference between pop and remove, the difference between actually creating a copy and just assigning two instances at once, and how we can access elements, what is the difference between forward indexing and backward indexing. Now let's say you want to clear your list. You want to clear the elements inside your list. So for that you can do print, no, you don't have to do print, L1 dot clear. And the moment you hit enter, and if you print L1, L1 is an empty list. L1 is an empty list. So that is the way you can clear your list. And if you want to see what all functions are available, what all methods you can apply to list, so you just have to write the list name L1 in Jupyter Notebook, then use dot and then press Shift Tab. Sorry, not Shift Tab, press Tab. So you can use, we have use append function, clear function, we have understand copy, count as well, extend, index, insert, pop, remove, reverse, and sort. Okay, so now we are left with sort function. So as the name suggests, it sorts the list in ascending order. Okay, so let me just create odd. So it is already sorted. So what happens if I create a unsorted list? So let's say unsorted equals to, let me just create, okay, now unsorted dot sort. And if you print unsorted list now, it will be, so now it's sorted. The sort function sorts the value, sorts the list in ascending order. So that's the end for this video. I hope you were able to understand all the functions thoroughly. In case you have any queries, please mention them in the comment section. I will try to resolve them. And if you find this video useful, please make sure you hit the like button. That way the video will be suggested to more and more people. So thank you so much and have a great day. I will see you soon.